What's up guys, and welcome back. Today I'll be making a track like Bicep, and this is a little snippet of what I'll be making. So as always, if you want the project file and the stems of this entire track, it's available to download over at my paid community. There's also sample and preset packs, courses, direct feedback, and so much more on top of that. So if it sounds interesting, there'll be a link in the description. So usually in my production videos, I do everything from scratch. I'll sit down as I record and make the idea. But in this case, it's a little bit different. Here, I've already made the drum groove, and all I'm going to do is lay down synths and other bicep kind of sounds on top of it. But first, I'm going to show you the drum progression. So this right here is the drum progression from Bicep's track Glue, one of the most popular EDM tracks in recent years. I actually showed this drum loop as well a few months back in my video on breakbeats, but this time I wanted to make a dedicated track out of it. So let's play the drums alone. So I personally think I did a pretty good job recreating Bicep's loop. Let's go through each individual element. We'll start with the kick here. So it's really just a normal kick, but I've done some processing on it that makes it sound really cool. Without the effects on the kick or on the bus, it just sounds like this. Really basic. And the kick just also plays a two-step rhythm on the first beat and on the third offbeat here. So for the effects here, I'm using what's called a transient split inside Bitwig, and it makes it sound like this. And I used this because I was referencing with Glue, and I felt that Bicep's kick sounded really wet, but it felt like convolution to me rather than a normal reverb, and it didn't seem to last very long. So what you can do inside this transient split plugin is Bitwig, is you can process the transients and the tail independently. So like a normal transient processor, you can also increase the gain of the transient and of the tail, but here I put effects onto the transient only. We started with the convolution reverb, where I just chose this impulse. And that's only on the transient. So the transient is wet, while the body and the sub of the sound isn't. And then we just got a filter from kilohertz to cut off the highs. And that's it. Then we got the snares. So the snare loop is also just two-step with one snare hitting on a swung 16th note. So let me turn off the effects that are on the snare bus. We have this first snare with no effects. We have this second snare with a frequency shifter. Without the frequency shifter. Just gives it a little bit different tone. And then we got the last snare. Those three together without effects. And then we put some effects on the whole chain. We got another frequency shifter down 150 Hertz. Kind of remove some of the tone from the snare, which is pretty cool. We got an RC20 for the reverb alone. It's a very bright reverb. And then we got an EQ to cut out lows. Then we got a hat. We got another hat on the swung 16th notes. We got another hat on some offbeats and some swung 16th notes as well. We got another hat, also playing random rhythms. And we got a shaker loop. Then we got another shaker loop, which as you can see I have chopped up and swung so it fits the rhythm of this track. Then we got a tambourine loop that I've also chopped up and swung. And then we got this reverse hat, which is also pretty cool. It plays after every 2 bars. That's got a frequency shifter on it, and if we turn that off. Now everything together without the bus effects sounds like this. And then lastly we got some RC20 on that, which cuts out a bit of the highs, adds some noise, some crunch distortion, some reverb, and some tape effect. So guys, that's the drum loop. I'm going to layer some sounds on top and make this a track. So I had the idea that the first 8 bars in this track should just be drums and then some stuttery vocal, like Bicep do in Glue. So this pad sound that I've just made inside this stock synth called Polymer in Bitwig Studio, I put after the 8 bar point. I'm going to make this progression really long though. As you can see, it's like 17 bars because Bicep has a tendency to make like really long and drawn out progressions. Anyway, the sound that I've just made looks like this. It's a sawtooth wave that I've just shaped a little differently with both this and the sync here, and then it's filtered out. That's got some detune, 1.48 hertz. If I turn that down, it sounds like, and then I turn on the stereo detune as well. Kind of has a chorus effect. Now let's make our chord progression though. That's pretty cool. I like that progression. I'm going to duplicate that over. Next, I've made a bass sound inside another stock synth called Polysynth. It sounds like this. Or down. It's a really warm bass, and I'll show you how I made it. It's really just a basic saw wave. There's not much difference from this and the init preset. What I've done is turn the pre-filter drive all the way up, 24 dB, and that gives some saturation. And then what I've done over here is chosen an LFO and mapped this LFO to the cutoff. That's what's giving it the movement. If you're not familiar with Bitwig, this is a really cool feature that you can do, where you can choose different modulators. I can both choose a classic LFO like this, or I can choose the random, which is something I also use in Vital if I use Vital. And you can map it like this to anything, and then it'll go up and down with the LFO. Anyway, I'm going to drag the progression down here, and then just delete all the higher notes, and then we got our bass. I've just put a limiter on the master just to prevent clipping. Let me duplicate this over, but I need some sidechain on this. So we're going to go in here, duck, and just make a quick sidechain like that, 60%. Choose the sidechain trigger mode, and choose the input as our kick. So the sidechain only triggers when the kick plays. Alright, so I've added another polysynth, which we'll add as a layer after the first 17 bars here. And that sounds like this with the same chord progression as up here. So that is a saw wave, which has got 16 voices of unison, but no unison detune. It's got a bit of noise as well. Then I'm using the filter oscillator FM, which is also a cool trick. I think I mentioned this in my granular video in a bit more detail. And then we got two modulators on here. We got this LFO here, and we got this random. So the LFO has these settings. I've then mapped that to the filter cutoff, so it goes up and down with this LFO here. And you can see where the ball is where the sound is. And then I mapped a random, which has these settings. And then I've mapped that to the pitch, which is going minus 0.1 semitones down. Those that watch my channel frequently will know that I do this a lot. I usually do this in Vital, where I'll map the random to the fine tune of the oscillators. It gives a cool analog effect because the pitch is imperfect and has fluctuations. But I'm going to put some more effects on the sound. We start with the Tal Chorus LX, which is a Juno emulation. And then I've added a Valhalla Supermassive with the preset Mellow Ambience. I've added another Valhalla Supermassive, this time with the preset Big Plate in Water. And lastly, we're putting an EQ on that to cut out the lows and the low mids and boost some of the highs. And that together sounds like this. I'm going to put some distortion on this bass to make it a bit dirtier. Without it, and with it. We're going to need some stuttery vocals now. Alright, so I found this vocal swell. I pitched that up 2 semitones and it sounds like this. It sounds kind of low quality on its own, but I'm going to make it fit. First of all, we're going to repeat this so it plays at the end of every 4 bars. Then we're going to put a Valhalla Supermassive with the preset splashy synth on it. Then we're going to put an LFO on it, which looks like this, to give it the stutter. And then lastly, we put another Supermassive after the duck with the preset Cygnus X1, and then an EQ to cut out the lows. And then what we're going to do is duplicate this, and then delete the first one every 4 bars, so we only have every 8 bars, and then we're going to pitch this up to create a harmony. I've added in 2 more vocal swells which sound like this after they've been pitched to fit. And I'm going to fit these in the track. Okay, so as you can see, I duplicated them over and then reversed them. That creates this kind of swell instead. And then I used the fade in and fade out tools to fade in and fade out. And of course, I'm going to drown these in reverb. First, I'll group them, and then I'll put the same effects on both sounds. Start with a decapitator for some distortion at 5 drive. Then we got a Valhalla Vintage Rib with around 3 seconds of decay, and then 86% mix. I'm actually going to turn up the decay of the sound to around 5.5 seconds because I feel like the 2 or the 3 seconds is a bit too short. Alright guys, this is where I'm going to end the idea. I could arrange this to make it full track, but I just wanted to make the main idea. I'll play it through and that'll be the end of the video. If you enjoyed the track and the production, then let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, all that stuff. And like I already mentioned guys, if you want the project file to take things out here and there and use in your own tracks, or if you want the stems because you don't use Bitwig Studio, then it's available to download in my community. But I'll play through and I'll see you guys next time.